figuring they might get the hint and reuse them. Don't want to contribute to the rubber shortage.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the September 3rd, 2019 meeting of the San Carlos Planning Commission to order. We begin every meeting of the Planning Commission with a pledge of allegiance to our great flag and country. I invite everyone to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome everyone. Can we please have the Commissioner roll call?
Commissioner Roof?
Present.
Commissioner Garvey?
Present.
Commissioner Bradley?
Here.
And for the record, Vice Chair Iacopone will be absent this evening. Chair Dugan?
Here. One second. We will now open up the floor to public comment. Public comment is limited to items not on the agenda. The Commission may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed. However, the Commission's general policy is to refer items to staff for attention or have a matter placed on a future Commission agenda. Do we have any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. Commissioners, were there any comments to the minutes of July 15th, 2019?
I'll move that we approve those minutes.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey?
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
And Chair Dugan?
I'll abstain simply because I was not at that meeting. We will now enter the public hearing section of the meeting. We have three matters before us this evening. The first we'll consider is the design review of two wall signs at 733 Industrial Road. The procedure is first our Planning Commission will review the project and give us their recommendation. Then we'll hear briefly from the applicant if they would like to present anything. Then we'll open up for public comment. Then we'll deliberate as a commission and make a decision. It's important to note that if you challenge an item on our agenda this evening in court, you may be limited to only those issues you or someone else raised tonight or brought to our attention in a writing previously delivered to the city. If you would like to speak tonight, please fill out a speaker's form found on the table in the corner and hand it in to us. All speakers must come forward to the microphone for the benefit of everyone who may view the recording of tonight's proceedings. Staff, you may now present the first item.
Yes, good evening, Chair. The first item will be presented by Kevin Beery, our Assistant Planner.
Good evening, Chair Dugan and the Commission. Tonight I will be presenting a design review application for two wall signs on the existing building at 733 Industrial Road. Just a little bit of site information. The site at 733 Industrial is approximately 1.65 acres in area and is located directly in between the US 101 and Industrial Road. The property is zoned light industrial. While there are three existing buildings on site, the proposed signage is exclusive to the rear building closest to the freeway. Existing land uses that surround the site include industrial, commercial, and single-family residential. The applicant, Widener, California, requests design review approval for two wall signs on the existing building at 733 Industrial on behalf of the current tenant, MBC Biolabs. The new signage will be the only signage on the building. Currently, there is no signage. One of the signs will be located on the building face oriented towards the freeway, whereas the second sign will be on the opposite side of the building facing the interior parking area. The San Carlos zoning code requires that the Planning Commission conducts design review of all signs visible from the US 101. Despite that the other sign is not visible from the 101, the planning staff has referred both signs to the Planning Commission for concurrent design review. The sign facing the freeway features internally illuminated letters and a cabinet, both featuring orange vinyl applied to a white acrylic face. Additionally, non-illuminated aluminum letters are situated below the cabinet and letters. The second sign features a similar design but is not illuminated, and that is the sign facing the parking area. The proposed signs fully comply with the San Carlos sign ordinance and the maximum number and allowed area for signage. While the zoning code allows up to 5 signs per building for individual tenant occupancies, the applicant is only proposing 2 signs. Moreover, the proposed signs are 36.2 square feet and 12.2 square feet in area, well below, significantly under the allowed maximum area for signage. The Planning Commission must make the findings listed here above in order to grant design review approval for signage. Based on the reasons provided in the staff report, the Planning Division staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve this request for design review. On the screen is a text of a motion to be used should the Planning Commission decide to approve this request for design review. Staff is available to answer any questions that the Commission may have on the signage, and an associate of Widener, California, Stan Schultz, is here to address any questions about the project. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. Commissioners, any questions of staff? Applicant, is there anything you'd like to state specifically? All right, terrific. This is a public hearing, so we can hear from the public now. Are there any speaker cards on this matter? Would anyone care to speak?
I'd like to ask a question of the applicant. Yeah, if you'll come up, please. Thank you. I'm wondering why you illuminate the sign that faces 101 when probably the labs will not be open at night.
Overall, it's a matter of brand identity for the company, trying to build brand identity over time. And there are times when it'll be open during the winter months when daylight savings time is on, and it still will be required. So on the parking lot side, there is lighting in the parking lot that'll illuminate that side. So,
thank you. Those of you that have been around long enough know that I'm usually the opponent of signs facing 101 because I think they're definitely a safety hazard. This is a rather small sign, so I don't see that it will be dwarfed between some of the larger signs that we've constructed.
Quick, it's a relatively low intensity LEDs with orange vinyl as opposed to bright white. So we've kind of accounted for that a little bit. But thank you.
Thank you. That's all.
Final call for speakers. Hearing none, can I have a motion to close the public hearing on this item?
I'll move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Great. Moved and seconded to close public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
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 Terrific. We can now deliberate as a commission. Commissioners?
Any discussion? No?
Yeah, Don, I hear your concern about signage towards 101, and I definitely share your concern when it comes to those large billboards that flash and change and are there specifically to interrupt someone's driving. I do share your concern there. I do see this as more of just a, relatively standard building identity sign. So I don't have a particular concern about this one.
I agree. I just have to reiterate from time to time my opposition to the larger signs, because I think they are a traffic hazard.
I would like to move that the Planning Commission approve the design review application for 2 wall signs on the existing building at 733 Industrial Road, APN 046-100-350.
I will second that.
Terrific. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Roof,
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey,
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley,
Yes.
and Chair Dugan.
Yes. Great. That takes us on to our next item, which is a design review and approval of a new residence at 528 Winding Way. And I believe staff will make a joint initial presentation with the design review approval of a new residence at 538 Winding Way. Staff?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Andrea Martisich with the Planning Division. As you mentioned, Chair Dugan, we are proposing to present both items together. As you're aware, they have a shared history, so we thought to consolidate that, we would share that. And then when we get into design review, we'll of course talk about the houses separately. And please feel free to stop me if there's any questions along the way. So as you mentioned, these are 2 new homes, one at 528 Winding Way and the other at 538 Winding Way. The first house is requesting design review approval, as well as waivers for overall height in the downhill building face and a variance for the natural state. And then 538 Winding Way is requesting the same entitlements with the exception of just one waiver, which is for the overall height and does not include the downhill building face. So in terms of location, this property is located it's located in a canyon at the existing end of Winding Way on one side and then near Chesham Avenue on the other side. So on your screen, you can see the 2 parcels in yellow that are under consideration this evening. These 2 parcels and the project site itself are surrounded by a couple of different uses, open space within the city of San Carlos, RS3 and RS6 zoning, which are single-family residential, also within the city of San Carlos. And then the gray area up here is all county zoning. So it's surrounded by a couple of different uses. Currently, the developer is building a road, which you can see on the screen in this dashed green line. So that road to connect Winding Way up at the top and Chesham down at the bottom is currently underway. There will be a gate at the top, so it won't be a through road, but it'll allow for fire access and other emergency services. So just a brief history of the project and trying to condense it a little bit. The site itself is a 3.4 acre site, and that includes 5 separate parcels. This was annexed into the city back in 2009. One of the conditions that of approval along with that annexation was that the applicant come forward with a master development plan, which would have to be approved and adopted by City Council, generally showing where the road would go, but generally showing where the proposed new homes would go. And you'll recall, I believe you saw this as well, those of you who were here back last summer, about a year ago. This was adopted by City Council in 2018. And as I mentioned, it provided general development for the 5 separate parcels with the idea that 4 of the parcels would be designed to be downhill lots, meaning the house would step down the hillside, while one of the parcels would be an uphill lot and step up the hillside. All 4 of the parcels on the lower side do have a creek at the rear, and there is get this up, there is a 25-foot setback here, this dotted line at the rear of all the properties, which prohibits any construction within that area. So in terms of the master development plan and previous conditions of approval, there were many, but I just wanted to highlight a few this evening. The lots were required to be a minimum of 20,000 square feet each. The plan also required that each home provide 2 paved off-site guest parking spaces. As you're aware, new homes require 2 covered spaces. In the RS3, it's 2 covered. These homes, each home is also required to provide 2 paved spaces. They do not need to be covered, but they are required per the master development plan. The houses are required to be built, generally speaking, where they were shown on the master plan. There's also a no development area, which is more conservative than the 25-foot creek setback. And then also, of course, mitigation measures from the earlier annexation and environmental impact report from years ago. So this will all apply, and this has all been approved as of now. So before you this evening is the design review request for 2 of the 5 new homes, as well as the associated waivers and variances. As I mentioned, these are undeveloped lots. The 2 this evening are both downhill lots, zoned RS3 zoning, which is our single-family low density. They're also subject to the Hillside Overlay District. Each lot, one is 69%, has a 69% slope. The other has a 67% slope, so very steep slopes. And again, because the creek is at the rear, they're also subject to the Stream Development and Maintenance Overlay District. And then in terms of general plan designation, it's single-family low density. On the right, you can see the aerial view, and it's the area within the green. That area is downhill from each side, so it's a canyon basically. And the houses you see to the right and left of the screen are actually uphill quite a bit from these 4 lots. So I just prepared a general summary of some of the requirements just to show the differences between the 2 houses. And of course, these are not all of the development standards, but wanted to show that both homes are proposed to be below the lot coverage limit, which is 25%. Both are significantly set back from the stream. 25 feet is the maximum, or I'm sorry, the minimum setback. One house will be 76 and one will be over 45 feet. And then the last 3 lines are the 3 areas where the applicant is asking for a deviation from the code. So for both homes, the applicant is asking for a waiver for height. For 528 Winding Way, he's asking for a waiver for downhill building face, and then both homes also would require a variance for natural state requirement, and I will go over each of those in a minute. So now to talk about each individual house in terms of design review. The first one is 528 Winding Way. The house on this lot is proposed to be 4,767 square feet, multi-level, and of course single-family residence. The house will step down the hillside, so this rendering shows that really from the street you're going to be level with the garage and the parking pad off to the right for that off-street parking. And then the house itself steps down the hillside. The garage itself does not connect internally to the house, so it's considered an accessory structure in terms of the setbacks and height for that. There are no protected trees proposed for removal. There's 15 on site. They're all proposed to remain, and the applicant is proposing 11 new trees on top of that. And then this is a partial site plan. I have the plans too if you'd like to see the whole thing, but just to generally show where the house is proposed to be located. In terms of the depth of the house, and again, the whole site is not on here, but the house itself is stepped up pretty close to the front in terms of being near the creek or near the non-development area. So this is the garage level, which is basically the street level. As you can see, there's at this level only the garage, the stairs down to the entry, and the guest parking. The middle level, which is the upper level of living space, has, the communal living area, a great room, dining room. There's also a bedroom and bathroom. There are stairs going down to the lower level, which is the sleeping area. And you can see on the lower level, as well as this upper level, there's quite large terraces off the back, which provide the outdoor space for the lot. So this is the front elevation, and that yellow line basically shows the profile of the street itself from the front. So you can see that for the most part, the house is not very visible from the front, anyways, from Winding Way. And then this again is the rendering of the front for 528. The applicant's proposing the residence be a dark color, autumn gray, with cedar siding in a natural color. The fascia, windows, and metal guardrails will be black. And then staff did ask the applicant to add a decorative material to the roofs because they're pretty visible from the street. And so the applicant has proposed a roof ballast in gray material. And that also directly relates partially to the request later on for a height increase, which I will go over in a minute. This is the rear elevation. So this is the downhill side that you would see from the lower part of Winding Way, and it's a little bit more clear here in the rendering. One thing I wanted to point out with this rendering is that you'll see the area clouded in the green. That was an earlier version where there was a outdoor terrace proposed. That's no longer part of this. So it's basically the same rendering with the exception of that highest terrace on the third level. But you can see for the middle and lower level, the outdoor area for the, the outdoor living space. And then the colors and materials are on packet page 91 within your packet. And then these are the side elevations, just to demonstrate that the house is really stepping down the hillside itself, and the use of various retaining walls to get the livable space within sort of the most compact footprint possible. So now switching to the house next door, 538 Winding Way. As you can see, it's a little bit similar in terms of the road being even with the garage and parking. However, it's a little bit less. Here you can see into the entryway a bit more with the stairs. This lot's about 30,000 square feet, and the house would be 4,646 square feet if approved. Similar to the other house, its entrances to the garage from the street, with the house stepping down the hillside. This lot has three protected trees, all of which are proposed to remain, and then the applicant is proposing 9 new trees as well. And again, here's the site plan. The gray area is the house itself with the 2 parking areas towards the front on Winding Way. And then on this floor plan, because although the garage and guest parking are at a different level than the upper floor, they're on the same floor plan. So I wanted to just highlight the parking areas, which are in the yellow there. So from the garage, you step down and take several stairs outside and then into the entry on the upper floor, which is again the communal living space with a terrace at the rear. And then the lowest floor again is the bedrooms with another terrace for outdoor area to the rear. One thing I want to point out is that this terrace on this level slightly encroaches into the non-developed area. So staff has included a condition of approval that if approved, plans submitted to building would have to pull that terrace back behind the developed area. There was question in the beginning whether that could cantilever over because it wasn't actually touching the ground, but staff felt it, conservatively, nothing should really encroach into that. So that was added as a condition within your packet. Here's the front elevation again, and I'll go to the rendering. Again, the rear, and the rendering is, of course, more clear so you can see the outdoor terraces. So this is the lower part of Winding Way looking up towards the upper part of Winding Way. And then again, the house stepping down the hillside. So in terms of the waivers, 528 Winding Way is requesting a waiver for two things, for overall height as well as downhill building face, while 538 Winding Way is requesting a waiver just for the overall height. So starting with 528 Winding Way, the applicant's requesting a height waiver to allow a deviation from the 35-foot maximum height limit. So on this slide, you'll see a red line going horizontally across the screen. That is the 35-foot maximum height limit allowed within the hillside overlay. The municipal code does allow a deviation up to 10% of the requirement, and so the applicant is requesting that waiver to an overall height of 38.4, which is that blue line on the screen. So that would be their highest point for the main residence. For the same residence, for 528 Winding Way, the applicant is also asking for a second waiver for the downhill building face. The Hillside Overlay District has a maximum downhill building face of 20 feet. And again, the 10% waiver can apply if granted. In this slide, you'll see an area clouded in blue, and within that, on part of the roof, you'll see the gray shaded like triangular area. That is the portion that's exceeding the maximum 20 feet. Because this lot slopes both downhill from the street, but also across a downhill cross slope. There's this one corner of the house that's exceeding that 20 feet. So they are asking for a waiver for a 1 foot 3 inch extension from the maximum 20 feet.
Andrea, can you just explain exactly what downhill building face means?
Sure, and if it's okay, I'm going to switch maybe back to this. It's a little clearer. On a downhill lot, we really want a maximum height of 20 feet for the face of the building that's closest to the ground. So in this case, it would be, say, from this point here up to here. What we don't want is, because houses in the hillside have a 35-foot maximum height from the lowest point to highest, we don't want a 35-foot wall. Sorry, I lost my mouse. Let's see. Where? Okay, thank you. We don't want a 35-foot wall from here straight up. So our code says you can go 20 feet straight up and then you have to step back. So that 20 feet is the downhill building face, the face closest to the lowest point on the lot.
I see, thank you.
Sure.
And can you show that, the variance again? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So in this, again, it's that triangular gray area that's exceeding the 20 feet. The rest of the house does meet that requirement. So for 538 Winding Way, they are requesting a waiver only for height, not the downhill building face in this case. So again, similarly, I included the red line for maximum height under the code, as well as the blue line for what they are requesting for the waiver. So in terms of the findings for those waivers, the slope itself has a direct impact on the height of the residence. And I will talk about the natural state in just a minute, but because there's such a high natural state requirement of 85%, the house itself has a very limited footprint on which it can be built. In addition to the house footprint itself, any paving, any grading, any stormwater improvements, all count against your natural state requirement. So because of this, and because the city, the general plan and staff would like to see the house built into the hillside rather than built above the street. It requires the house to step down a bit, and due to the slope, it drops down pretty quick. In terms of the findings themselves, staff believes that the request itself is reasonable. The portion that's increasing above the height does not have any windows associated with it that would contribute to neighbors' privacy concerns. The extension itself is just is the roof only on both of them. Let me just, check one thing. With the exception of the garages, the house and even the extension will be pretty much below the hill itself, so not very visible. And the houses are also generally located where they were approved at in terms of the master development plan, so staying within that general area. All of the neighbors are located uphill from the site. So the house itself, while taller, would not have any significant impacts on any neighbors. And then I'm gonna go into the variance request for natural state, and I'll talk a little bit more about natural state as part of that as well. So for both of the homes are requesting the natural state variance. What we asked the applicant to do here was provide a diagram showing what each proposal would look like if it were to comply with natural state. So natural state is part of the Hillside Overlay District, and it requires that, in this case, due to the steepness of the lot, that 85% of the lot remain untouched. And as I mentioned before, that includes grading, paving, sewer pipes, stormwater improvements. All of that counts against your natural state. So it's not like lot coverage where it's just structures. It's basically, if you touch it, it triggers it. So in this case, as I mentioned before, the master development plan required each house to provide 2 off-street parking spaces for guests. So in this diagram, which complies, which is 85% untouched, the garage, paving, and stormwater treatment already exceed the minimum required. So without even building, a larger house footprint, they've already, violated the 85%. So we did ask for this to just show, due to the steepness of the lot, the difficulty of meeting that requirement. For this lot, if the variance is approved, then instead of 85%, the applicant would have a 66.4% of the lot in natural state. And when figuring out what those percentages would be, we also asked the applicant to really look ahead into their construction. We had another applicant a few years ago who came through with a variance for natural state, very steep lot, and they hadn't considered the amount of overcut they'd have to do for foundation and things like that. So we did ask this applicant to be very, conservative with what they were doing, but really think it through so that we knew pretty closely exactly how much natural state would be disturbed, and we wouldn't have issues down the road once construction started. So in terms of the house next door, 538, again, this is the diagram if they were to comply with natural state. So on both of these, and sorry, I should have mentioned that, the hatched area is kind of the footprint of what's allowed. Again, this one with the parking and stormwater measures, they're close, but already, going above what's allowed. On this property, the natural state requirement, if approved, would be 69.5%. So in order to grant a variance, there's several findings that have to be made. They're outlined in your report. But generally speaking, staff believes that the findings can be met. Both properties are located on very steep hillsides. Although the lots themselves are fairly large, over 20,000 square feet, most of the area is not buildable. Unless significant amounts of grading were to be done, which would be further violate our natural state requirement. The creek at the rear limits the buildability, as well as the reservation of non-developed area that came along with the annexation. In addition, although the applicant is requesting a variance from natural state, the lot coverage of the buildings and structures themselves are under the 25% maximum allowed. Anyone who were to develop the site would have the same obstacles with regards to natural state, and the physical hardship for these lots are due to the geographic features of the site, not due to anyone's actions that cause this hardship. So it is a naturally occurring feature that's causing the hardship rather than one created by the applicant. The applicant did attempt to build the house into the hillside as much as possible. The alternative to this would be to build the house going up, so not either going up the hillside or sitting on top of the street rather than stepping down, which would not comply with a lot of our general plan policies and also our concerns with massing and visual impacts. In addition, the proposal will be required to comply with all previous mitigation measures from the previous environmental report. The proposal also complies with the general plan as well as the zoning title. In terms of outreach and neighborhood comment, the applicant both mailed plans to the neighbors and held 2 neighbor meetings, one for 528 Winding Way, where no neighbors attended, and then one for 538, where 2 neighbors expressed support. The city, of course, sent notice for this meeting, and one letter was received after the packet went out, which was emailed to you, but also a copy is on the dais from a neighbor who expressed concerns with the variance requests, and so that's there as well. Staff also received a phone call from a neighbor just asking general questions if we required story poles and things like that, and we replied that we don't for single family. But other than that, we have not received any comments. So I've split this into 2 motions, one for each house, should you choose to approve it or approve them. I'm available for questions, and we also have the property owner and applicant and his architect here, as well as a representative or city engineer from Public Works, if there's any questions about that. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. Commissioners, any questions of staff?
On the compliance diagram, that hatched area had a really irregular shape. Why is that?
I believe it's for stormwater compliance, just based on how the lot is sloped and how it drains. That's where their stormwater measures have to go, but I could ask the applicant to come up if that would help.
I think that explains.
I just flipped through the plans. Do we have any interior floor plans of this building, or is that TBD?
Do have, let's see. Let's go.
Do we have copies of that in large format here?
Yeah, so let me get you the page numbers.
I couldn't find it, and I don't see it in the
They're
sheet index.
pretty big plans with a lot of different.
Actually, I do see it now. Okay.
So, yeah, looks like.
So what I'm looking for in the floor plans, and maybe someone can point it out if it does exist, are there, this is a large house. Is there any separate living space like like a grandparent's unit or, an ADU or any part of this floor plan suggestive of that use?
So not shown on the plans. However, were someone wanting to do that in the future, there's definitely ways that could occur. There would have to be a separate entrance to the outside, so possibly one could be done in the future. It would have to go through building permits if that were to happen, but it's not part of the proposal this evening.
One of the plans has a 4th bedroom or study that has its own bathroom and its own outside interest off the deck. I forget which one it was now.
I believe it's the one I have up now, right? Towards the left of the screen, is it that one? Yeah. So anytime we get applications where it looks like there's an accessory dwelling unit, but they're not applying for one, we put a restrictive covenant on the property requiring them to come through the process if they are going to end up utilizing it that way. And we could, if the commission would like, we could add that as a condition of approval.
Any other questions of staff?
I have one. I don't know if I should wait for the applicant to explain or perhaps both. What's the story on the gate? I went driving up there all the way to the end where the construction on a warm day and almost got my wife's car stuck in the mud, dust or something. Anyway, she made me go get it washed. I got all the way to the end and you can't get through because the gate is there. And I know they stayed in here, it's not a through road, but I can't imagine the fire department approving something like this, because there's no way they could get any engine up there and back out. I had a hell of a time just with my wife's two-seated car getting it out because it's a narrow, winding, steep road.
Well, I think the road's under development. Is that the right way to understand it?
Yes, maybe I'll try to take a stab at this. And I think if I know our city engineer is here this evening, maybe she has an update on the status of the road. I personally haven't been up there in a while, but I am aware that the road is currently under construction. And so the matter of the road and the matter of the gate really came about through the annexation process and the conditions of approval that were tied to that. And when the master development plan was submitted by the applicant for review that went through the Planning Commission process and ultimately to City Council, there was review of the road, the road width, what the materials of the road that would be, and also consideration of the gate and conditions tied to that gate and how access would be granted for the gate in cases of emergency. So this was all considered through that process and was also considered and reviewed by the the fire department as well. And so all of those conditions that were placed on the gate, the matter of the road, et cetera, are still stand and would need to be carried out throughout the entire course of this development. So while the design review is only for the homes, all of the required mitigation measures and standards and conditions for the road and the gate are still being executed and will be required as part of the overall site development of the site.
So I'm a little lost at the end there. So eventually it'll be open, or just for emergencies? For
emergencies, yes. So the fire department will have access. I know during the course of discussion, there was request whether the immediate neighbors or some designated person of the neighborhood could also have access. And I believe that was a condition of approval that required the city to evaluate that as time went on. I don't know if we have a status update on that at this time.
That's not exactly my recollection. What I recall is more probably in my world, where the city was part of a litigation that resulted in a settlement, and some of the mitigations that were included in the CEQA document arose out of the settlement agreement, and that included that it would not be a through street. And so one of the mitigations to address fire safety was to have this be a fire gate. I do believe, and maybe staff can correct me, is that there will be a pedestrian walk passage through there, so it won't be as I don't know what's the right word, kind of rough right now. The way it's been set up there for the last 50 years is just a cyclone fence with a chain on it right now.
I suppose what bothers me is, are we creating another Crestview Hallmark situation where we have our city and Belmont cut off?
Yeah, the way, I mean, it would be difficult to do it, but it would have to be a brand new project that the council and then perhaps would need to involve some of the litigants in the prior litigation to address it any other way at this point.
It seems to me the most desirable thing would be to open it up through traffic. Most people are opposed to through traffic like Crestview and Hallmark because there'd be thousands of car trips a day going through there. In this case, there are only two houses being built now and maybe 3 more in the future. And it's good that we can open it up in case of an emergency, but I can't see what would be wrong with not having a gate there.
Well, I'll just, the staff just prevented me with the actual condition of approval. It says, prior to gate installation, the city planning and public works staff shall work with the city of San Carlos Fire Marshal and the city attorney to determine if additional gate access could be established for life safety and emergency situations while maintaining compliance with the settlement agreement to limit through traffic. So that's kind of where we stand on it. And then I might add that, you know, that's really not on our agenda tonight. It's more talking about design review and the variance, et cetera.
Sneak it in. Thank you.
On this street that's under development, so I see the requirement for 2 guest parking spaces, and it sounds like that'll be a requirement of every development on Winding Way? Okay, and then is it also correct then, so this Winding Way will be narrow in a way that street parking's not possible on it?
I believe so, and also the concern is with delivery trucks and turning around would be pretty difficult to do there, and I think the concern was that the narrowness of the street as well as the slope would not be safe to have people park along the side.
Got it. And given that this is a dead end, is there a turnaround? I know we reviewed that grading plan a year ago, but I'm just trying to recall, like, what will the UPS truck do on this road?
I think
they have to turn around in each other's driveways, I guess. Because the road is very narrow without a cul-de-sac.
This is it, yeah. So a few things. There's actually, as you mentioned, there is a 3-foot wide pedestrian path along it looks like the whole road. So that would also be one reason why we wouldn't want the parking along the side. The road itself is about 18 feet wide apart from that path. So turnaround would if that gate is there, turnaround would have to occur either in the individual driveways or in that off-street parking area for each property.
Okay.
Is there mail delivery at each of these houses? Will the mailman be coming to each house every day, or?
I'm looking at the applicant and he's nodding yes.
So the mail truck isn't too big. I guess the mail truck will figure it out. Yeah. Okay.
Terrific. I'm sure we will have more questions, but would the applicant like to present anything about this project?
Right now, I'm here to answer any question I can. Staff pointed out exactly what's going on. This has been a very extensive project, and they're very hands-on. They've kind of covered everything on the variance. Is there anything left to answer any questions anybody has?
And Ron, if there are additional questions from the commission, when you do respond, if you could come up to the microphone so we can get it all on record. Thanks.
And through the chair, I apologize, I forgot to mention one thing at the dais. The applicant also prepared the sheet showing the square footage numbers of homes within the area, just to show for comparison. But I do want to point out that the numbers on this sheet do not reflect garage square footage. So, you know, if you add 400 square feet to them, assuming they have a 2-car garage, or 600 if they have a 3-car, that's going to be more like it. So again, this is from the applicant kind of showing the square footage of his house in comparison with the neighborhood nearby. Thank you.
I have a question about the natural state disturbance, and you mentioned that if any work is done, then it counts as being disturbed and goes towards that percentage. How much of the area is permanently disturbed versus perhaps temporarily disturbed and then could eventually kind of revert to a more natural state?
So how we've been interpreting it, first of all, there's not, in our municipal code, there's not a specific definition of natural state. So based on the information in there in general plan, we've come to interpretations of what it would entail. For new undeveloped lots, the interpretation has been basically that once it's touched or graded, it's probably a better threshold. Then it's it's disturbed. We have had instances, depending on the design of like retaining walls, where if it's not huge cuts into the dirt, but it's really sort of landscape retaining walls that they're sort of just holding the dirt. You're not really grading it, but doing that, we have made some interpretations that does not count. But to your point, not so much with lots like these, but lots that are already developed and in the hillside are still subject to this. So lots that have been graded 50 years ago, what do you call natural state and not when it's already been graded and redesigned and all of that. But I think for these new undeveloped lots, we've been pretty conservative with it. Also, because of the environmental concerns and sensitivities in the area. But that is something that staff's talked about needing to really dial in. Yes, sorry, and it sounds like maybe I did not understand the question. So the area that is permanently disturbed is also counted towards, yes, and temporarily.
Wondering how much was permanently disturbed and how much is temporarily disturbed.
Okay, so I think for our purposes, we'd consider it all permanently disturbed, even if it's temporary, even if you're moving it and putting it back for natural state calculations. Once you touch it, it's...
So you haven't calculated the amount
that's going back in or anything, no.
It's more of a calculation of what is disturbed in order to construct the project. So once that area is disturbed, we count it towards the area that is not natural state, and then the area that's not being disturbed counts towards the natural state percentage. So we don't really break it down into temporarily and permanent. We're just really interested in understanding, well, what area of the land is going to be disturbed in order to get this house built. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a couple questions of the applicant, if you could come forward. And did you want to briefly respond to what was last said?
Yeah, my name is Ron Groban.
We do have a table representing what is the permanent natural state, as you were asking, and what's for like sewer lines and drainage. And I think we point that out on A2.
Okay. Yeah, so these are large homes. First, I applaud you for tackling a challenging building area. I know that is a challenging area. As a city, we do want more housing, and I also believe development in our canyons like that is good for fire prevention. I think just having development there will allow for more of that undergrowth being maintained. And so I think in general, these developments are beneficial for the city. So the height requirement is not a significant concern of mine. It's within the 10% waiver, and you're not in anyone's view, and it's not going to look overly large. I think it'll still, even if you found a way to get back there, it would still look like a two-story house. The building face variance seems very minimal, so supportive of that. But the natural state, that's a significant one, because that is kind of part part and parcel with what it is to allow development on hillsides. And so you are asking for, in my view, a pretty significant variance on that. So as I look at your designs, again, large homes, was there any consideration to having accessory dwelling units as part of these plans? I know personally, if I had a home of that size, I would like a corner of that for my in-laws or perhaps my au pair, or even to rent it out as an ADU. Was that ever considered as part of this plan?
Yeah. Number one on the natural state, after putting all the retaining walls in, as I pointed out in A3, and the parking and all that stuff, you can't build a house there without going over natural state. It's just impossible because of the rules under the guidelines today for San Carlos. 40% slope, kind of anything over 40% triggers that natural state to go over. So in this case, we couldn't do anything about that. As far as the au pair, yeah, every one of these are a suite, and we always like to put really concentrate on putting one floor upstairs to make it easy for an au pair unit or a in-law unit, so they're all suites. So generally, if you're going to have your family move in or something, or a father or mother, it's set up as a separate suite on the main floor, so there's not so many stairs. Mm-hmm. In this case here, the stairs are extensive because due to the height, we have to get down as quick as possible to meet the requirements. But we did put a study / bedroom / bathroom on the first floor, so it's an au pair or a guest.
But no kitchen associated with that?
No kitchen.
Okay.
They're just, as you can see, there's just not enough room. A lot of the space is due to having to be long and narrow because of the rules for the stepping down the hill. If we're able to make it more square and deeper, we can fit that stuff in. But right now, it's kind of a long, narrow walkway to get to the different parts of that house. We tried to set it up so when you came in the entry, we can get it as close to the middle as possible, but it just didn't work out with the garage due to the fact that we got to be long and narrow on that steep lot.
I see.
We've been working on this for, I think we've submitted probably 4 or 5 designs before we got it just right, just the way the city wanted it.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant?
I have 2 questions. On the roof material, I saw in the packet the ballast, and it mentioned a decorative material that's going on the roof. Can you describe that in a little bit more detail? Is that loose roof material? It seems like it has a color to it.
Yeah, it's colored rock, and it's a flat style colored rock, and it's basically we were going with a flat kind of like due to the height, we can't have a pitch roof. It's got to be flat. So we went with kind of a flat cap sheet type roof, and staff thought we should do something a little more decorative. So I saw a pretty cool design of a house in Hillsborough that was a downsloping house that had this rock ballast on it. So I sent a picture over, and they liked it, and so that's what we entertained. But it took a while to try and find something that looked down on a house that was attractive.
Is it a synthetic material, or it's
real rock?
It's real rock.
So we had to engineer the house to hold the rock, and it's got to be big enough to sit loose and not blow away. So they're like 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch rock that covers that whole roof.
And then there's a ballast that goes around it, and if it rains, somehow the rainwater drains off so that increased weight doesn't
Due to that rock, we had to raise the roof up to put a curb inside to keep the rock inside the curb. So it raised up the roof an extra 8 inches to meet that ballast.
My second question relates to the trees. I saw a diagram for each house that had, I think it was nine trees on each house, and they were nice, big, mature trees. When they're first planted, are these going to be nice, big, mature trees, or are these smallish trees? And this photo or rendering was like, 30 years out.
No, they're all 24-gallon trees, and we build a lot of houses. But the vegetation, we overdig our holes, and I don't know if that counts towards natural state, but we overdig our holes so they irrigate real well, and they take off really good. I mean, everything, we do a couple, 3 or 4 a year, and everything we do is we kind of screen both sides of the houses, and that's what we've tried to do here to make it private on both sides and also kind of blend the house into the hill.
Thank you.
I did have a follow-up question. Just, again, so it looks like you've already thought about an all-pair unit or something separate. If we were to apply a condition of an ADU as part of your plan, how burdensome would that be? I think that would involve a separate entrance and adding a small in-suite kitchen.
Yeah, I don't know that I think those rooms are 12 by 13 is the minimum size bedrooms is what we put in. And I'm guessing those bedrooms are about 12 by 13 because we couldn't really fit any more in there. If we put a kitchen in there or another suite up there, I think the house is going to have to start getting even bigger. So,
I haven't studied your floor plans, but this is 4,700 feet as presented.
It's 4,700 feet, but it's kind of misleading. The garage is part of that, and that garage with the staircase and all that picks up almost 500 feet, maybe a little more, Greg? 500? And then I think is the entry covered as part of the covered space or no? So the houses are they're large. They're 4,000 feet after the garage.
Okay.
It would be difficult to add a kitchen.
And excuse me if I may jump in here a little bit on this conversation. The other thing that staff would like to share is that because of this location of these homes, most likely an additional parking space would be required for an outright ADU. The state also provides for provisions of what's called a junior accessory dwelling unit, or a JDU, and those currently are not contemplated in our code. It's sort of kind of like an ADU that is a small ADU, and it maybe allows for like a small kitchenette or some lesser degree of kitchen services for the unit, but it does require a separate entrance, and it is allowed within the existing footprint of a home. The city is currently going to be working on its ADU ordinance in the upcoming months. So that's something that we could consider. And I believe that if, maybe the easiest route could potentially be a JDU option. If the commission is really interested in having the applicant look at that. And I believe that JDU may not require a parking space. I don't have all of the state mandates down inside my head perfectly, but for an actual ADU, there is a requirement for one additional parking space because of the location, where ADUs are constructed in areas where they're close to transit or within certain proximity of a bus. You don't have to provide parking for that ADU. But with a JDU, there might be some flexibility in that. So I just wanted to mention that to the commission. I think an ADU would make it problematic getting that additional parking space on site.
I can tell you on 558, the next house coming to you pretty quick, does have an extra kitchen. That's my house. I'm going to keep it for me, and I'm actually making provisions for.
Yeah, that's my perspective. I think if you own one of these, you would want that, and I think it's marketable as well. So I think looking at the builder's residence is a good key to what everyone probably wants.
I'll tell you what, the only lot we could do that on is 558. We might be able to do it on the upslope lot, but the 558 is on the curve, so we were able to squeeze it in. Due to the difficulty of designing these houses, it only worked on that one.
Yeah.
And that's why I chose it.
No, and I appreciate that, and I don't want to get bound up by definitions. I just think more opportunities for people to live in this city is what we're trying to accomplish. So I don't think an ADU or even a JDU definition is required, but would a condition that this au pair unit has a separate entrance and a kitchenette, period, would that be overly burdensome?
I think, let me refer to Greg, does one of them have a separate entrance to that one? I think on the upper floor, the one upper unit. See, we got rid of that deck on that one side. It would have.
Yeah, I'm Greg Kamahar. I'm the architect.
Oh, true.
I think what you're talking about is the second entrance can be problematic. On one floor plan, the one up there right now, there's a study/bedroom 4 that's up on the upper level. getting the second entrance over there is problematic, as well as the parking space.
Probably about 25 feet off the ground. Right,
Vertically.
that back
I know
corner.
on the other lot where the study/bedroom form is on the lower level, it's 30 feet vertically from the street to get down to that level. It's a lot of steps, a lot of steps.
Fair enough, but is that right? There won't be exterior steps on the perimeter of these buildings?
We were struggling because, as we're not proposing any sort of yard space, so that's why we're providing all these large terraces, because realistically, to get any flat level yard space for any of these owners is very difficult and problematic, especially with the development setbacks from the creek and the Runda line. I can't remember the exact, that's an abbreviation, Runda, for one of the biological setbacks, restrictions.
Yeah, the outdoor living here is your decks, because getting on the 60% slopes your dog's going to have a hard time doing that. So.
Yeah. Just side access for the owners is going to be a challenge, so to say, to maintain the yards. Because I don't know if you've been out there, standing on the road, it's
pretty steep. I have walked that, yeah.
We built one recently on Winding Way on the other side, on the same type of slope, 60% slope. And it's a lot easier to build than walk around it. Once I cut the pad, we can build it. But to walk around the darn thing after it's built, it's a real pain in the butt.
Yeah. And don't flip your Bobcat over.
While you're up there, have you
just to make sure I
considered solar panels on the flat roof?
I think that's all. Everything we do is prep for solar. So I'm sure that somebody would come to you guys again when that time came.
Yeah, the roofs are going to look nicer with the gravel on them, of course.
All right. Yeah, very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions of the applicant?
A clarification about the ADU unit. That doesn't have bearing on the variance request. That's a separate issue.
I guess why don't we save that for our deliberation? And terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is a public hearing, so we can hear from the public now. Do we have any speaker cards? I've not been handed any. Would anyone here like to speak on this project? All right, hearing none. Can I have a motion to close public hearing on this item?
I'll move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Great, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 And just for the record, that would be because we were presented both of these as a combined item. You've closed the public hearing for both of the residences that are before you today.
That was my intent. Is there any objection to that by fellow commissioners?
No. That's fine.
No.
Okay, very good. So we've closed public hearing on both items before us on Winding Way. Terrific. Now we can deliberate as commissioners.
So I'll ask my question again,
Sure.
just to understand your thinking about the accessory unit. Is that a freestanding thought, or is it relevant
Sure.
to the
No, I mean,
natural state?
That's a good way to put it. It was a freestanding thought that, we have an applicant clearly grappling with a tough lot, and I would like to see housing even in our tough lots, because not only does it add housing to the city, it also provides, I think, fire break and helps mitigate what could be very bad if fire moves through one of those canyons. But that said, and I could get into my thinking on the height variance and the building phase variance. I think both of those are very minor, but natural state variance, I mean, I view that one more seriously, simply because it's that's part and parcel in my mind to building on one of our steep lots. If you are going to undertake a steep lot, you get certain benefits. You can have greater height, et cetera, but then you can't go and, let your bulldozers go crazy back there. So I think this is a public benefit. If we allow a variance like this, I think it's fair to ask for a public benefit. And I view, there's also, the letter we received on this project and in other hearings we hear, boy, how does a 4,700 square foot house help our housing problem? And on one level, it does, right? Because someone likely moved out of another house to move into this house. So on some level, more housing is just that, more housing. But it does occur to me that if we allow what I do view as a pretty significant variance on the natural state, I think it would be fair. And in fact, I don't think it's damaging to the project at all to request the potential of there being an additional opportunity for housing within the same envelope. In this case, even the builder thinks it's a good idea for the one he intends to keep, which, and I would want that if I had a 4,700 square foot house. So in a way, that's part of my, I view our role also to help push these designs in a direction that makes sense all the way around, specifically if it puts the city in a better spot, which in this case would be an additional opportunity for housing.
Thank you.
That said, I live on a steep lot, and I do understand some of the challenges associated with a steep lot. If we did have a mind for that, maybe it would only apply to the one house that has already contemplated the ensuite unit on the first level. I think that would be relatively straightforward to add an entrance there and allow a kitchenette. And my thought would be we don't have to require it be an ADU or a JDU. We could just simply say it can have a door between the rest of the house. It can have a kitchenette, and it has a separate entrance. I think that meets my thought, but maybe that's not a complete thought. So very interested, and this occurred to me sitting here this evening, so I will not say this is a fully formed thought. So I definitely would appreciate the other commissioners weighing in on this.
Yeah. I just have a comment through the chair. I like to make sure I remind the commission that what we have is a design review, which typically is the look and feel and the compatibility of the residents with the neighborhood. We have the two exceptions for the face and the overall height due to the slope. And then we have the one that I think was just being talked about. It's the variance for the natural state. And there are specific findings for the variance for the natural state.
Thank you for that, Greg, and please continue, but can I get the page number for the findings?
It's page 43 of the packet.
Thank you.
42 and 43. And so the findings there are basically to address the exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applicable to the property that do not apply generally to other properties. That's kind of a standard variance. One of them is compatibility with general and specific plans. That's probably the one you're trying to drive at. But my other concern is because the idea here is not. It would require a kind of a redesign of the interior of the house, and I have a concern that the definition of our code calls an ADU a unit with a kitchen in it. I mean, I think you conditioning something and saying we're just gonna require a kitchen but not call it an ADU, I think strikes me as something that would be difficult for us to craft here on the fly. There might be a way to work with the applicant further if that's what the commission wants, to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with something about the way the design is, or you're thinking that you'd like to grant a greater variance, I suppose, for natural state if that's going to accommodate some other feature on the house. But it's not really the analysis of community benefits versus this variance, because this variance is really for a very specific purpose. It's not like a development agreement where we're contemplating freezing the zoning for a site or allowing an extra height on a large building and then being able to use that in a negotiation to get some community benefit. This is kind of a different, it's a very specific property-based variance that's required. And I think even in the development agreement, we're still it still has to comply with the general plan and the general purposes of the general plan. So I think just what I'm hearing is if there is a desire to probe that issue further with the applicant about having an ADU, I think what I was hearing was there's some pretty significant design constraints on these two properties to have an ADU that would comply with our code. And then I already stated that just simply allowing them to add a kitchen, I think strikes me as might be violating the code in another respect, because they're not really allowed to have that unless it's part of an ADU. So I think we would have to grapple with that for you to try and make that work and then work with the applicant. That having said that, this project has been here since before the city, since when I was a deputy city attorney, probably in the late 90s, I think is when this all started. Yeah. So I think this project or this development has a really high number of constraints on it, from the lawsuit to the condition, the actual slope and condition of the property. The creek setback is an area that's not going to be disturbed, so that kind of ties in with the natural state requirement. I mean, my understanding when I read the staff report is when you have a very steep lot, the natural state requirement and the building code for drainage and utilities and other access areas that are required for fire use up all the natural state requirement. So if you took it literally, you couldn't build a house on a lot. So that's why we have to have a variance. If we didn't have such a strict natural state rule, this house might not need a variance, but it does. Any house, probably most of the houses and lots that you're going to see in San Carlos, if there are any lots left in the hillside areas, are going to need this type of a variance, just because of the nature of what parcels are left. So that's just kind of background information what I think you should be considering when you're looking at the findings. And it's not, anyway, I've said enough. I just think we need to look at it carefully.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That's helpful background. And so perhaps this is a bit off topic, but I would encourage staff that as we look at the ADU code in the coming months, let's think about what variances are we traditionally often asked for, and is there any way to also add thinking about ADUs to the various variances that we get requested for. So instead of just perhaps a standalone ADU section, maybe references to ADUs can start to appear in other areas of the code where we're being asked for variances. I like the idea of tying, boy, if you want to do more than what is naturally allowed here, you know, we do need more housing. So especially on large properties, I like the idea of tying ADUs or maybe these JDUs make more sense to the notion of granting variances, especially on these large projects.
And through the chair, I just wanted to communicate for the record that of the requirements of that original master development plan, it did specify that each site has to have 4 off-street parking spaces, but it didn't say for whom. So if in the future a potential homeowner wanted to carve out an area and find a way to structurally, you know, have it be accessed separate and have the kitchen and all of that, it doesn't look like parking would be an issue, because there are, through the master development plan, each lot already has to have for parking spaces. And the master development plan didn't go further to say whom those would be for.
Got it.
So
And,
that should-
and our current ADU requirement is just one space for the ADU.
Correct, in
Okay.
areas where they're not close to transit.
Got it.
Yeah.
And in general, that can include in the garage and in front of a garage. So like all of our 2-bedroom homes, as long as there's space in front of the 2-car garage, I'm sorry, all of our 2-car garage homes, as long as there's parking spaces in front of those garages, that would allow for an ADU?
Provided that the driveway was long enough to accommodate that, because the required parking space has to be on the site, so within the parcel. So that is something that, sometimes can be a constraint depending upon the configuration. Maybe the parking goes elsewhere, or maybe it's not required. But certainly whenever there is a requirement for parking, that parking needs to be on the site. So,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful overview. Terrific. Anything else, commissioners?
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I really appreciate the design of these 2 homes, and to the extent the development took into consideration the natural state. They have a low profile, they're set into the hillside. I really appreciate all the hard work that went into trying to keep a low profile from the street. I also appreciate the comment that was made earlier that this development helps with fire breaks with all the fire concerns. That I think that's an ancillary benefit that I hadn't considered, and I appreciate the comment that was made. Thank you.
My impression is that the scale of the home sort of consistent with the area and with the master development plan that we're sort of guiding development by, and so it doesn't seem out of line in terms of that they're asking for a variance on the natural state, but it's consistent with the larger picture of what's appropriate in that area. And so and I'm agreeing with what you say, in that the overall impact is quite minimal compared to perching houses on the hilltops. And so I think I would be in favor of granting the variance.
With all that being said, I think these are good ideas for the future to look at every project from every angle that we can. Therefore, I'll move that the Planning Commission approve the code compliance certificate for a new residence, approve the waiver of the overall height of the residence, and downhill building face, and a variance to exceed the natural state requirement as outlined in the code compliance certificate for 528, and it just went out. Are we doing, let's do 528 first. Is that it? Okay.
You do need a script for these.
I haven't memorized this, so I'm going to rely, just so we get the words right.
There you go.
Okay. I left off exceed the natural state requirement as outlined in the code compliance certificate at 528 Winding Way, APN 049-141-670, based on the findings and for the reasons incorporated in the staff's report and as conditioned in the waiver, variance, and code compliance certificate.
I'll second that. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey?
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
And Chair Dugan.
Yes. And the chair would now entertain a motion for 538.
I move that the Planning Commission approve the code compliance certificate for a new residence, approve the waiver for the overall height of the residence, and a variance to exceed the natural state requirement as outlined in the code compliance certificate at 538 Winding Way, APN 049-141-680. Based on the findings and for the reasons incorporated in the staff report and as conditioned in the waiver, variance, and code compliance certificate.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Roof,
Yes.
Commissioner Harvey,
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley,
Yes.
and Chair Dugan.
Yes. Terrific. So those matters are approved, and appreciate, I think they're handsome designs as well. Good luck in the construction, and appreciate you taking on this challenging project.
With that said, we need the one, I think we can get another one in the Apple, that parking area. We can use one of those parking spaces, we can probably get another ADU in the upsell lot. We'll try and make that happen.
Terrific. I'd like to see that. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Yep. Terrific. That concludes our the public hearing portion of our meeting. We can now move on to reports, correspondence, and general information.
No reports from the City Council this evening.
Terrific. Unless there are other matters, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at
I'm sorry.
7A. So if there are no Planning Commission comments or reports, I'll go ahead and skip to correspondence. I did want to note for the record that we did receive one public comment from, which was delivered to the city via email, which was forwarded on to you, and I believe you had a copy at the dais this evening for the item you just discussed. And then in addition, I did provide a copy of a Planning Commission training opportunity that is being sponsored by 21 Elements. This is a group that works with all of the cities within San Mateo County regarding housing and a number of different matters related to that. And they had recently provided some training opportunities for new planning commissioners. They have a training opportunity coming up, which is October the 30th. Which will be held at the San Mateo Library. Dinner will be included with this. So dinner starts at 6, and the training goes from 6:30 to 8:30. And the topic is transportation transformation, understanding patterns in San Mateo County. So for those of you that are interested, it's free. You're welcome to go. All they require is that you register an RSVP, and there's some contact information. I emailed this to you as well, so I just wanted to make a note of that. And then lastly, in looking at the projects that are currently under review, none of them are just ripe enough to be presented on September the 16th. So we will be canceling the Planning Commission meeting of September 16th and then returning in October. And on the agenda for October, we have a couple of things that will be brought before the commission. One is an ADU study session. So this is a study session whereby members of the public will be invited to come and attend and participate and contribute their comments toward this topic. We want to talk about ADU, state law and policy discussion items with the commission. So we will be having sort of kind of like the public outreach process occur as part of a study session with the Planning Commission. So we'll be doing a lot of outreach on that, and I will get you the date as soon as, I believe is it right now we're looking at the first meeting in October, but we want to make sure we're ready, so it could move to the second, but we're getting very close. And then we have a new mixed-use project that's on the agenda for October, which is at 1240 El Camino Real. This is a new mixed-use project. And then finally, we will be bringing back the Cal Water Tank project, whereby engineers from Cal Water and their designers have been looking at ways to increase additional landscaping to buffer and screen the new water tank proposed. I believe this one's on Melody. And did I miss anything, Andrea, that you can think of? Any? Oh, right. Thank you. I think it was at the last council meeting, there was discussion about having mini retreats with some of the commissions. As you may be aware, the City Council has retreats where they bring up a number of different items and set forth their strategic objectives, things that are priorities for the city to accomplish. But this time around, so they have their retreat usually at the beginning of the year. Prior to their retreat, they do want to hear from the commissions, so such as the Transportation Circulation Commission, the Planning Commission. So staff will be coordinating a special meeting with the Planning Commission, so it wouldn't occur on a regular agenda whereby we have business to conduct, but we would likely be holding a special meeting with the Commission and have a moderator so we can talk about, what the Planning Commission's input may be, and then transfer that, any planning recommendations or thoughts or comments about things that the city should be looking at or considering, anything that's come up during your tenure here. The idea is to transfer those to the City Council so they could consider those as part of their retreat. So I don't have a date for that yet. It could be end of October, early November, but you will be hearing more from staff about that as we look forward to schedule something with the commission.
Would that be a public meeting?
That would be public because yes, anything that we do with the commission would be public.
Would that be an evening meeting?
Most likely. Most likely evening meeting.
Terrific. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I would just, I would hope staff wouldn't just help us facilitate that, but we would also love to hear your ideas as a staff on what you're thinking about and what we can then echo up to the City Council as well.
Absolutely. We'll provide some context and let you know about all the things that we have to do, and then certain things that we currently are looking at doing within the next couple of years as part of the strategic objectives that have already been set by council. So we can definitely provide some context and prep the commission so we can have a meaningful discussion.
Terrific.
And that's all I have.
Through the chair, I just have one introduction to make tonight. I have in the audience Jeremy Kirschner. He's a recent graduate from Hastings Law School. He's joined our firm. He took the bar exam in July, so he's waiting for his results that don't come until November. It takes him 3 months to review all those exams. So you might see more of him. He's already assisting me with some of the municipal law work that we do at our firm, and just wanted to introduce you to him. You might see more of him.
Terrific. Welcome to the team, Jeremy. We're glad to meet you, and good luck on those bar results. Great. Unless there's anything else, we stand adjourned. Thank you. I was wondering when that